The hug should have made me happy. Instead, the moment my wife wrapped her arms around me at the airport and whispered, "I missed you," I felt something inside me go cold. I had spent 3 weeks counting the hours until I could see her again, imagining her smile, imagining the way she would run toward me the moment she came through the arrival doors. But then another man stepped beside her, calmly reached for her suitcase, and took it from her hand as if he had done it 100 times before. My wife didn't stop him. She didn't even look surprised. And when she finally looked back at me, the expression on her face told me that whatever I thought I knew about my marriage was about to change forever. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can change a person's life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. You never know when a simple story can remind someone that their darkest moment may not be the end of their life. My name is Calder, and for most of my marriage, I believed I understood my wife, Maribel. We had been married for 7 years. We weren't rich, but we had built a comfortable life together through years of ordinary sacrifices. Our apartment was small, our furniture was old, and our kitchen table had a scratch running across the middle because we had bought it secondhand when we were newly married. Yet I loved that table because so many important moments had happened around it. We had eaten our first anniversary dinner there. We had opened bills there, laughed there, cried there, and once spent an entire night planning a vacation we never managed to afford. Maribel worked in corporate event management, which required her to travel frequently, while I managed a small equipment repair business across town. Her latest trip was supposed to last only 3 weeks, but a project complication had delayed her return. I missed her more than I wanted to admit. Every morning, I woke up reaching toward the empty side of the bed before remembering she was hundreds of miles away. That afternoon, I arrived at the airport early because I wanted to surprise her. Sunlight poured through the enormous glass windows, reflecting across the polished floors while travelers dragged suitcases behind them and families reunited near the baggage claim. I stood near the carousel holding a small bouquet of flowers I had bought from a roadside stand. They weren't expensive. Maribel had always said expensive flowers made her uncomfortable because they felt like an obligation. She likes simple flowers, especially white ones, so I had chosen a small bunch of them and held them nervously in my hand. When I finally saw her walking through the crowd, my heart jumped. She looked tired but beautiful, wearing a dark jacket and carrying a black suitcase. For a second, everything else disappeared. I smiled, stepped toward her, and she suddenly saw me. Maribel rushed forward and hugged me tightly. Her arms wrapped around my shoulders, and for one beautiful second, I forgot every lonely night of the previous 3 weeks. She pressed her face against me and said she had missed me. I closed my eyes and held her tighter, telling myself that this was what I had been waiting for. Then I heard footsteps behind her. A tall man wearing a dark blue polo shirt approached with a strange confidence. He looked directly at Maribel, then reached for her suitcase. She released the handle without hesitation. The man picked it up and stood beside her as though this was completely normal. I looked at him, then at my wife. I waited for an explanation, but Maribel simply stared at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't guilt exactly. It was fear. The man introduced himself as Soren Vale, saying he worked with Maribel's company and had been assigned to help with transportation after her flight. He spoke politely, but there was something guarded about him. I tried to shake his hand, but my mind was racing. Why had my wife never mentioned him? Why did he know which suitcase was hers? Why had he behaved like someone who had done this many times? Most importantly, why did Maribel look terrified instead of embarrassed? I asked her if everything was okay, and she quickly nodded. She told me the company had arranged a driver because the project had ended late and she was exhausted. I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe her. So I picked up her smaller carry-on, forced a smile, and walked beside them toward the parking garage. The drive home was painfully quiet. Maribel sat beside me while Soren followed in another vehicle because he needed to return to the airport office. I kept glancing at her. She stared out the window. Finally, I asked about the trip. She said it had been stressful. I asked about Soren. She became silent. That silence hurt more than any accusation could have. I didn't shout. I didn't demand her phone. I simply asked whether there was something she needed to tell me. Her eyes filled with tears, but she still said nothing. When we arrived home, she carried her suitcase into the bedroom and closed the door. That night, I barely slept. I sat alone at our scratched kitchen table, staring at the flowers I had brought her. By morning, they were still sitting in the paper wrapping. Maribel eventually came into the kitchen and looked at me with red eyes. She finally told me that Soren wasn't her lover. He wasn't her boyfriend. He was the reason she had been terrified to come home. The truth was stranger and far more painful. During her business trip, Maribel had discovered that one of the senior executives at her company had been secretly stealing money through fake vendors. She had accidentally found financial records that connected the executive to several fraudulent transactions. When she tried to report what she had discovered, she was warned to stay silent. Soren had been hired as part of the company's security team after another employee who had tried to expose the fraud received threats. He had been protecting Maribel during the final days of the project because management suspected someone might try to intimidate her before she returned home. He had taken her bag at the airport because he had been instructed never to let her carry anything alone while she was under protection. But there was one thing Maribel had hidden from me, and it was the reason she had been unable to speak when I asked her about him. She had been receiving anonymous messages for nearly 2 weeks, and one of those messages had mentioned me. My stomach dropped when she showed me the message. It said that if she talked, the person threatening her would make sure her husband paid the price. Suddenly, the strange airport scene made sense. The man taking her bag wasn't the betrayal I had feared. He was trying to keep her safe. And my wife hadn't been hiding another man from me. She had been hiding danger from me because she was afraid that telling me would put my life at risk. But the story didn't end there. That same afternoon, Soren returned with evidence from the company. He explained that the investigation had uncovered something much larger than financial fraud. The executive had been using several employees as false names to move money through shell companies, and Maribel's discovery could expose everything. She had been chosen as a witness because she was one of the few people who had accessed the records without being involved in the scheme. I looked at my wife and realized how badly I had misunderstood her. For 3 weeks, I had complained about her being distant on phone calls. I had accused her of becoming emotionally cold. I had wondered whether someone else had entered her life. Meanwhile, she had been lying awake every night afraid that a single wrong decision could destroy both of us. I felt ashamed, but she didn't blame me. She simply reached across the table and held my hand. The investigation lasted several months. Maribel had to testify, and Soren continued working with the authorities to protect everyone involved. There were difficult days when fear returned, but something changed between my wife and me. We stopped assuming that silence meant betrayal. We started asking questions instead of making accusations. We learned to talk about fear before fear turned into anger. Our marriage, which had once felt like it was slowly breaking under the weight of ordinary life, began to heal through honesty. One evening, months later, we returned to the airport together. We weren't there because of an emergency. We were simply waiting for Maribel's sister to arrive. We stood near the same baggage carousel where everything had changed. The sunlight streamed through the windows just as it had that day. Maribel looked at me and smiled. She reached for my hand and held it tightly. I looked around and remembered the man taking her suitcase, the fear in her eyes, and the terrible story I had created inside my own head. I realized something that day that I would never forget. Sometimes the person standing beside you isn't betraying you. Sometimes they are fighting a battle you know nothing about. Sometimes silence isn't rejection. Sometimes it is fear. And sometimes love doesn't look like a romantic movie. Sometimes love is simply two tired people choosing to stay, communicate, forgive, and begin again. Years later, we still had that scratched kitchen table. We never replaced it. Every time we sat around it, we remembered how close we had come to losing each other because of assumptions and fear. Maribel once told me that the airport had taught her something she would never forget. Coming home wasn't about arriving at a place. It was about knowing there was someone waiting for you who would still choose you after learning the truth. And I finally understood why her first words that day had been, "I missed you." She hadn't been pretending. She had truly missed me. She had missed the only place where she felt safe enough to stop being afraid. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need their message of hope, forgiveness, and second chances. Special request: before you leave, comment "I choose understanding over assumptions" if you believe real love means listening before judging. Because sometimes, the biggest mistake we make in love is believing the story our fear tells us before giving the person we love a chance to tell us the truth.